Hi everyone, in this video I will talk about how I planned and implemented an English writing lesson. My Year 2 students need to learn how to write narrative stories for this term. In this lesson, students were required to rewrite a story which is boring. My students were excited about this because I told them to pretend to be editors working for a children's magazine. The learning intention of this lesson is for students to practice building tension in a story. Before students were asked to write their stories, I had already prepared them with this story planning graph, which illustrates all the key elements of an interesting story. This graph was introduced by McVady in her narrative writing manual. I also used these supporting images to attract students and help them to remember these elements in orientation, complication, and resolution. So, in the beginning of this lesson, after introduced the learning intention and the task, I reviewed the tools of building tension with my students. They are a sizzling start, small, medium, and a main problem, which are also called as pebble, rock, and boulder problems, the exciting action climax, and descriptions of 6 senses. Then we brainstormed and joint constructed some descriptions for each part of the story. I wrote keywords on the whiteboard as reminders. And then students could rewrite this boring story to make it an interesting one independently. We could see the progress this student made in these 2 stories written at different times of this term. In day 1, week 1, she started her story with Once Upon a Time. There was little tension built and the structure of the story was not clear. However, in week 3, she rewrote the story with a sizzling start, which is sound effect, splash, whoosh, wee. We can see clear structure in her story with problems getting bigger and bigger, and the tension built alongside. Collecting and analyzing students' work samples like this also reflect my practice in meeting the AITSL standard. This standard requires me to understand how to set up appropriate assessment and make comparisons and analysis on students' learning as an ongoing process. To meet this standard, I recorded students' writings in different periods and checked if they have met their individual goals, which also will change if needed. Another standard I've met in this practice is this one. I planned lesson sequences using my knowledge of the teaching and the learning cycle, which was illustrated by Duriwanka and Jones. I set up different tasks for each week and each day, following the cycle to make sure my students could read enough quality texts, gain a clear understanding of the features of this test type, get scaffolding to plan and write a whole story, and finally write interesting stories independently. The third standard I worked towards too is using specific literacy strategies to achieve effective teaching in narrative writing. During the teaching and learning cycle, in phase 1, I used a guided talk about books, including class discussions, think, pair, share, proposing questions like what do you like or dislike about the story, or what hooked you in this story. In phase 2, I used close reading, which involves talking about features like the structure, vocabulary, reader-author relationships, and so on. I also selected mentor texts, which are quality narrative books, as models for writing to stretch my students' capabilities. My supervising teacher gave me some feedback of this lesson. She said that students were fully engaged, and it was good to refer to knowledge we've learned before. It was also good to work with students who need help, and I set up different goals for students in different levels. Despite one point that it could be better to use an actual book rather than one page of written texts, this lesson was quite successful and the students' progress could be seen in their writings. Thank you.